to this now. Today is World Water Day. We have many challenges here in South Africa. Not only are we a water-scarce country, but our infrastructure and continuous power cuts causing endless problems of access for many South Africans. Let's discuss this now. I'm joined by Dr Zakhele Khuzwayo, Manager for Innovation and Technology at Johannesburg Water. Doc, thank you so much for joining us in studio. I really appreciate it. On this World Water Day, what is the biggest challenge that Joburg Water is facing?
Well, generally, our biggest challenge is dealing with aging infrastructure. We have many issues that we deal with, but a lot of them come back to infrastructure aging. We have a huge backlog, which has been there for many years. In fact, almost every decade, we are accumulating a lot of backlog, and it's causing a lot of issues for us going forward. That is actually the major issue at this point.
And, you know, that scares me because that sounds a lot like Eskom's problems. You know, there was aging infrastructure, a backlog in repairs, and it created a perfect storm. How serious is it for Joburg Water? I mean, could we see a situation where we have regular water cuts in the city if this isn't addressed quickly enough?
Well, in terms of having water cuts and the citizens struggling, we are not there yet. It's an issue we're trying to manage. Of, I think, 2023, we have about 120 or a bit less, 100 million, or billion rather, backlogs within
the infrastructure space.
We have almost less than 120 billion.
120 billion what?
Backlogs in infrastructure.
What does that mean? In rands, you mean?
Yes, it means basically that old infrastructure, which should have been replaced, has not been done so for a long period of time. And of course, according to our equations, that's looking close to about 120 billion rands to date.
So it would cost 120 billion rand to fix all the ailing infrastructure in Joburg Water's network. Is that what you're saying?
In the city itself.
That's massive.
That is huge, and it's growing every year. In fact, it's exponential, because I think for 2021-22, it was almost 103 billion. And within a single financial year, you've shot up to close to 120 billion.
I mean, how do you sleep at night? It's terrifying what you're telling me. I'm trying to absorb it, but that sounds like a massive backlog in infrastructure. Not only is it aging infrastructure, but we've got a lot of people moving into the city desperate for work. So more and more people need water, don't they?
Yes, basically we need to manage the demand. It's growing exponentially each year as we're getting more individuals into the city. So we're trying to manage where we come from, the infrastructure, as well as where we are going, trying to make sure that everybody is covered within the city of Joburg space. It's a highly growing environment, both from individuals as well as industry as well. So it's one of those challenges where we need to manage how we go forward and also make sure that we do have safe and drinkable water to our citizens.
How much has load shedding added to the burden for Joburg Water?
It has a lot, to be honest, because when we speak of, for instance, the recent interruptions, it's when basically we have power failures taking place at pump stations, whether it be ourselves or Rand Water. This, of course, cascades down to a point where we are continuously interrupted. And of course, we try and manage this as best we can. Now, mind the fact that infrastructure itself, the failures are also sometimes related to the, to the interruptions. So it's actually quite major. And of course, in a lot of our sites, we weren't exactly equipped with having the sort of the crossover generators and so on, because it's a newly sort of emanated thing. And we had not put the billions of dollars
Yeah, I mean, it was there,
it's
been around for a while, but it's got so extreme in the last year, hasn't it?
Exactly.
And it's those extreme levels of load shedding that really cause the problems in getting the water into the reservoirs and to the residents, specifically in the high-lying areas. Is that right?
Yes.
So is there a maintenance plan? Is there budget available to start systematically working on these problems?
Yes and no. From a Joburg Water perspective, I know we are trying to make sure that we have measures in place which you can use to try and deal with the demands, with the issues of interruption. But of course, you also have budget issues. I'm sure you're aware that the city of Joburg has been struggling, and of course, budgets have been cut. So we're trying to work in a situation where you need budget to go forward, but it's very hard to go forward when the limitations are there. But we try and maneuver within that. It's actually quite a difficult job in the end to try and keep everybody happy and still deal with the sort of the end-lying issues that we have.
You're a manager for innovation and technology at Joburg Water. Talk to me about some of the innovations. I mean, are there new ideas coming online to make water management more efficient?
Yes, there's always ideas. Ideas are not the limitation. The limitation is, again, implementation, which leads you back to budgets. Unfortunately, with municipalities, we're not research focused. So we have to sort of eat into the budgets, which are meant for other things, to try and provision for ways to try and improve our systems. So there are plans in place, and from my side as department head, you try and look at where you can assist. And one of the bigger issues we have is that it's very difficult to go forward if you can't exactly fix the issues that you're basically dealing with. We have, like I said, again, back to aging infrastructure. We have an issue where we have one pump station which is not performing accordingly. You know, how then do we deal with that? Again, you must also put in place supply chain limitations. So from an innovation perspective, it becomes a company-wide effort. It becomes an executive effort. It becomes basically a city effort to enable technology itself and innovations to try and take shape such that we can address the issues. So at this point, we're still trying to deal with the backroom issues where we can align and enable technology to do its job. So right now, we are all focused from a geographical perspective on how to get from a point where we know where to go and how to go.
So you've got a clear direction of where you need to go.
Yes.
You do obviously have limitations and challenges. You don't have unlimited budget. The way things are now, if the status quo continues, say, with load shedding for another 2 years, if you're able to maintain your planned sort of maintenance infrastructure, will the city of Joburg be water safe, or could we and should we be preparing perhaps for water outages? Should we get our heads around this now?
In planning and looking where we are, especially when it comes to backlogs, that's something that we wouldn't necessarily necessitate us trying to make sure we deal with. But having the issues we have now, I don't think we're at a state where it's dire, where the citizens will experience shortages, in this case, shortages. But looking at the backlog we have, which started many decades ago, that could be a lesson learned to try and start dealing with the issue at this point. But in terms of the issue being dire at this point, we're not there yet, because we do have a good management team. We also have a very good asset management team as well. So we do provision and we work within the confines of what we can do, especially in line with the limitations.
Here's the critical question, because we know the politicians didn't listen to the experts at Eskom. Do the politicians listen to you when you say, listen, we have got a problem if we don't do what we need to do in terms of infrastructure repair?
Yeah, I think from a Joburg water management perspective, we are stressing at these points continuously, of course, through the executive and the MD and the COO and such. But the listening part I kind of test for. All I know is that we are literally pointing the fingers in the right direction. Whether they listen to or not is something we'll see. But there is a sort of a positive vibe within the space of the city of Joburg, at least acknowledging that we need to start moving in the right direction. Right now, unfortunately, we are picking up crumbs from the carnage which has taken place over many decades. But once those are put in place, I think it will be easier for us now to start moving forward in terms of at least being able to pinpoint how to close the gaps, number one. Where there are links that are disjointed, we need to make sure we deal with those, and also be innovative in how we think. Because innovation is not just how you fix the technology part, it's how do you run a organization and so on.
And it's also about sustainability, because
yes.
Let's face it, you're putting out current fires of many years making around infrastructure. The bigger reality is that we're in a water scarce country, and water is going to become an increasingly precious resource over the years. If you look at the amount of water that coal-fired power stations use, I mean, that's astronomical. It's another reason why we need to go green, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think I got an article which said that in 2005, we're using about 292 million cubic meters to basically deal with coal.
How many swimming pools is that? It's
I
a lot.
haven't done the equation, but it's a lot. In fact, again, I read an article this morning from, I think, the World Water Week Forum, something similar to that, where basically coal mining and coal power production is equivalent to 1 billion people per billion tons burnt. Which means basically, of course, that's a bit of a vague analysis in terms of how much does one person use per se. But just looking at it in equation format, it speaks of a huge amount of water that is used in coal production and so on, and mining itself, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Another reason why we have to go green. Thank you so much for speaking to us so frankly about the issues. Good to hear, at least, that there is a real understanding of the challenges ahead. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. That was Dr. Zakhele Khuzwayo, Manager for Innovation and Technology at Johannesburg Water, speaking to us on World Water Day.